Good morning. Here I am again. I agreed to give Patrick a break this weekend so that he can continue his recovery from his heart attack and hospitalization a couple of weeks ago, and so that he can enjoy this weekend with his daughters who have flown in to help him in his recovery and probably to keep him entertained fully, I imagine. I want to acknowledge how much we appreciate his getting out of the hospital and preparing and giving the message last Sunday. That was not an easy task. He had called me. I was in Palm Springs with my wife on a 2-week visit there, and he said, "No need for you to rush home. I'll handle it this Sunday, but could you possibly do the next one when my daughters want to come to town?" And I said, "Sure enough, I'll be there." We were in Palm Springs, and like you know, in Palm Springs, usually this time of year, the weather's pretty darn good. There were a couple of days, though, where there were winds that blew, not intermittently, constantly, and very heavy. Careful. And it blew so heavy that a lot of the palm fronds on all the palm trees around were blown off down onto the ground. The ground was littered with palm fronds. And those fronds reminded me, especially at this time of year, of the biblical story of Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem on a holiday that was called Passover. He arrived to the shouts and hurrahs and gleeful explanations from the local people who were so entranced with him that they took palm fronds and threw it on the path in front of the donkey that was carrying Jesus into Jerusalem. So that became known as Palm Sunday. Unless I missed my guess, some of you are watching this talk on Palm Sunday this year. That's the Christian tradition, Palm Sunday, which is, of course, 1 week before Easter Sunday. And we all know that that biblical story of Easter resulted in both a crucifixion and a resurrection. The message that I'm going to be giving today has kind of something related to a type of crucifixion, but no resurrection, but perhaps a reawakening and a reaffirmation of a worthwhile promise and a future of hope. I'm taping this message on Saturday, the 27th, Palm Sunday. And tomorrow, of course, a lot of you will be watching it, and that's the 28th of March, that's Palm Sunday, This is the Passover, the first day of Passover today. It was just last week we celebrated the spring equinox, which was, of course, the time when we did the time-honored tradition of springing forward on our clocks so that we could recognize daylight saving time. All these events occur at the same time of year. It's our annual reminder that, 1, the dark days of winter are over, 2, we just might need to do some spring cleaning, and 3, hope springs eternal. And we have certainly endured a dark, dark winter this entire last year. Think of the pandemic and all of its hardships, the never-ending presidential election, the continued killing of unarmed Black people by police, the attacks recently against Asian Pacific Islander Americans, the continued mass shootings of innocent Americans, the resurrection at the Capitol, the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. And now there are over 230 bills pending in lots of state houses around the country to do away with many of the voting rights of the people. The state of Georgia just did a truly despicable job in that regard. And while our country cannot be resurrected from these problems, because it hasn't died, not yet, but it never has previously lived up to our creed of liberty and justice for all. It nevertheless shows in this spring a number of new buds that just might flower into something that we know as better days ahead. For example, we all probably are enjoying the recent stimulus checks, $1,400 for adults that we just got. $300 per week boost to the unemployment insurance for those who are on it, and it's going to last through September. The child tax credit becomes a lot more generous this year. Lots of money is going to fight the pandemic, and lots of money going to the states, local government, and schools. And of course, the Affordable Care Act got a big boost as well. So that is all really good news. And there are additional hopeful signs for the future, like the gun safety provisions contained in H.R. 5157 that has been passed by the House of Representatives and now resides in the Senate. We might all want to let the senators that represent us know how we feel about that bill. And then, of course, there's the Black Lives Matter movement, which many of us are supporting through our money and involvement. I have actually taken it one step further. I now am a member of the NAACP, the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. If you're like me, you might be bothered with the term colored people, but that is what they call themselves. I've always thought that it would be better called NAAPC. No, PC is not for political correctness. It is, in my mind, for people of color. So, in my mind, that's a more current reflection of who deserves our support. And a lot of people of color are supported by the NAACP. And for those of us who decry the current condition of our democracy, I believe we all need to support in every way possible a most ambitious, comprehensive, and important effort that is embodied in H.R. 1 and now soon S1. It's the For the People Act, passed by the House, now pending in Senate, and there's a super thin majority that is in favor of it, so we'll have to see where this goes. If enacted, that bill would expand voter registration and voting access and limit removing voters from voter rolls. It would provide for states to establish independent, nonpartisan redistricting commissions. It seriously improves election security, including cybersecurity of election systems. It addresses campaign spending, establishes an alternative campaign funding system, and sets forth provisions regarding ethics in all parts of the government. I realize that none of those will be easy to pass because of how politically divided we Americans are. So, in looking for inspiration, I went back to a book that our minister Patrick had recommended that we all think about getting. It's called The 5 Levels of Attachment, Toltec Wisdom for the Modern World by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. And in it, he has this basic premise. If my attachment to what I know blinds me to all available options, then my knowledge is controlling me, even if my knowledge could possibly be wrong. By becoming aware of our attachments, we can question our knowledge and beliefs and take more control over our own lives. Ruiz identifies 5 distinct levels of attachment: the authentic self, preference, identity, internalization, and fanaticism. The first level, authentic self, is just who we are, without any attachments to beliefs that separate us from other people. We enjoy what we are doing or seeing and whom we are doing or seeing it with, without any permanent attachment to an outcome. When it's over, we move on to the next experience without judgment or regret. That's being your authentic self. When you enter the second level, preference, you form some preferences by choosing to invest more of your own beliefs and emotions into an activity, thereby it becoming more attached to the outcome. Yet at the end, if you're still at level 2 here, you move on and you let it go. In level 3, identity, you invest more of yourself in a belief or a situation. At this level, you may enjoy still the banter between you and someone on the other side of an issue, but you identify with your position. It is part of who you think you are. It may not lessen your opinion of the other person, but hey, they don't think the way you do, so how good can they be? When you get to level 4, that's called internalization. You have internalized your attachment to a belief or an issue to the point where you are certain that others who don't agree with you are completely wrong. There might be some strong arguments here, but they'll usually not lead to physical altercation. But you may well wind up excluding those who think differently than you from a relationship with you. You don't want to be around them. This belief is now a condition of your own self-acceptance. You have internalized it. Level 5, fanaticism, is just as scary as it sounds. True fanatics will do anything and everything for their attachment to a belief. They will turn their backs on any person or family member who does not support their worldview on this issue. They are so attached to this belief that they may fight for it. Witness the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, or they may even die for it. Witness the suicide bombers of 9/11. Now, Don Ruiz does give us many ideas on how to move ourselves from a higher level attachment to a lower one, what I would call a more healthy level. And I intend to study it a lot more closely and deeply, and I highly recommend that if you haven't already gotten the book, you do so, because there's lots of good information in there that can help all of us. Remember, it's called The 5 Levels of Attachment by Ruiz, Jr. Another book that I am currently reading, again, is What Can I Do? Also recommended by our minister, written by Jane Fonda. And in it, she gives lots of ideas on how you can do various things and get yourself involved in order to accomplish some worthwhile goals. Excuse me. And I'm using that book as my springboard for action. One of the actions I'm taking is right now. I'm using this bully pulpit to spread the news and ask all to be proactive in making your views known to those in power. For those of you who think that those levels of attachment described by Ruiz Jr. really can't affect your life much, let me close with a personal story. In early February this year, I received an email from a close friend, lifelong close friend, that stated this about the recent presidential election. I don't know much about the new president as a person, but I do know that I am deeply concerned about the actions he has already taken and how he has taken them. And I wonder how far he will go to please his political base, even at the potential tremendous cost to both the history and the future of our country and its citizens. What's truly amazing to me is those words reflect exactly what I was feeling, not now, but 4 years ago, when the prior president started his presidency, except the difference between what this friend said and what I believed then was, I thought I already knew exactly who that new president was going to be. Well, he said all those things about our Joe Biden, whom I consider to be a most decent, gentle, and loving soul, who absolutely has the best interests of all Americans at heart and is taking steps that I believe are necessary. So you can see this dear friend of mine and I have totally opposite opinions of the same person. And I believe that Biden is taking those steps in order to protect both the history and the future of our country and its citizens. Does that sound familiar? That's what he said in his email to me about Joe Biden, that he's putting those things in danger. Well, Even though it is a new spring, I doubt that this friend and I will ever come to agreement on these heavy issues. But we don't necessarily have to let it interfere with our relationship. We can, and if we get to that final level of 4 plus and 5, we might let it ruin the friendship. But right now, I think we're hovering in the low level 4, and I know that I don't want to let that relationship go. So I am going to be working on my own de-escalation of levels. We're probably in 4. I'd like to bring it down to 3, to maybe back to my authentic self, at least in my relationship with that friend. So the point here I'm making is I can't make him do anything. All I can do is change myself so that perhaps our relationship remains as good or maybe even better than it has been. I am determined to concentrate not on how our positions differ, but on how we both really have the same goal in mind: the history and the future of our country and its citizens, and their protection and their advancement. Namaste.